We see ISIL, a brutal, vicious death cult that, in the name of religion, carries out unspeakable acts of barbarism, terrorizing religious minorities like the Yazidis, subjecting women to rape as a weapon of war, and claiming the mantle of religious authority for such actions. And lest we get on our high horse and think this is unique to some other place, remember that during the Crusades and the Inquisition, people committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ. In our home country, slavery and Jim Crow all too often was justified in the name of Christ. So this is not unique to one group or one religion. There is a tendency in us, a sinful tendency that can pervert and distort our faith.
Talk about high horse. This from a man who refuses to use the term radical Islam. Here now with reaction, nationally syndicated radio talk show host, I call him the great one, Mark Levin, is with us. You talk about moral relativism, Mark. The terrible deeds in the name of Christ. He can't even say the Islamic State is ISIS. Would he ever say the terrible deeds committed in the name of Muhammad? Could you ever hear those words coming out of his mouth?
No, we won't. This man is a nihilist and a narcissist and an extremist, and I would like to suggest that, Mr. Obama, here's a suggestion for you as the leader of the United States. This weekend, rather than going off and campaigning or going on vacation, why don't you go across the Potomac River into Arlington National Cemetery? Why don't you walk the rows and rows and rows of the dead heroes who liberated peoples who were facing genocide and tyranny of all kinds, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and all kinds of wars. Those young men, if you look at those headstones, the overwhelming majority, all religions, but the overwhelming majority, Mr. Obama, are Christians. Why didn't you speak to them today, Mr. Obama? And ironically, you brought up slavery in the United States. And what's ironic about it, Sean, is if Abraham Lincoln took the position of Barack Obama, it would have been something like this. Lincoln saying, we've had slavery on every continent, in every country, since the beginning of mankind. The Egyptians enslaved the Jews. The Romans enslaved the Christians. Slavery is almost a human natural act, is it not? And Lincoln would say, following Obama's argument, don't get on your high horse. This is not an existential threat, Obama said the other day, of the genocide in the Middle East. And Lincoln might say, why in the world would I send hundreds of thousands of men to their death to end slavery? What Obama is saying and doing is the lowest of the low now. He really is not a leader of a great people. He's not a leader of a great nation. He is stuck in his own ideology. He's stubborn and ignorant at the same time. There are black Christians and black Muslims in Africa who are being slaughtered. They don't want to hear about the Jim Crow laws. There are Christians, there are other Muslims being slaughtered in the Middle East. They don't need a lecture from Obama about Christianity. The fact of the matter is, Obama is not doing anything effective or substantive to stop genocide in our time.
Why would the president build this straw man argument, though, and go back 1,000 years, 700 years, 500 years? Why would he do that and yet, to this day, does not recognize the reality? For example, this week, we saw how the Jordanian king responded when a Jordanian pilot was burned to death. He ended up killing terrorists that they had in prison, and then he bombed the living daylights out of them. When we had the beheading of James Foley, within 3 minutes after a quick statement, the president was on the golf course for 5 hours. How do you compare and contrast the two different responses?
Because he's not the man of compassion and empathy that he claims to be. Obama has a very high tolerance for misery, not his own, but for everybody else's. And he's turning the world inside out. He's not only fundamentally transforming America, but by his actions and his inactions, he's fundamentally transforming the world. And what we now have is tyranny on the rise, genocide on the rise. Our allies are looking over their shoulders. They do not trust us to back them up, and they are right. At the same time, the enemy is on the rise. We are gunning our military, and our borders are open. It's exactly what I said. We're dealing with nihilism, we're dealing with narcissism, and we're dealing with extremism, and that equals Obama.
All right, so the president's mysterious reluctance and resistance to even mention radical Islamists, radical Islam. The Islamic State is not Islamic, he says. He keeps saying this has nothing to do. 99.9% of Muslims are good people. Well, I'm looking at Muslim countries like Afghanistan and Iraq and Saudi Arabia and the Sudan and Pakistan, and we see oppression of women and human rights there. So somehow there's a disconnect. I don't think he'd ever talk about the terrible deeds done in the name of Muhammad. So what is this world view that he is using, that he sees here?
Look, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and I even think the best of them couldn't figure him out completely. But listen to how ludicrous his argument is. We were at war with the Third Reich. The Third Reich was Germany. The Nazis were German. Every German in the world wasn't a Nazi. We had American Germans who fought against Hitler, but we still called them German Nazis, the Third Reich in Germany. This is a hang-up Obama has. The problem is, if he were in a typical left-wing Ivy League classroom as an adjunct professor spewing this stuff, that would be one thing. The problem is he's commander-in-chief, and he's actually implementing this thoughtlessness, this idiocy, or he's not implementing anything at all. The whole world, the free world, is praying to God we can get through the next 2 years and get through this. One other thing. Obama's speech today sent two messages. One to our enemies, that this is not a serious man, they are gut-laughing, and one to all those people who are suffering, whose families are being slaughtered, that they cannot count on the President of the United States for help.
All right, let me show you two maps. Savannah Guthrie, during the Super Bowl, interviewed the President and talked about how his strategy is not working. The President vehemently denied it, but there you can see it on the map, the increase in ISIS-controlled territories and the battle for both big cities and small, and the control that they've taken. Then we look at radical Islam in January 2015, and its worldwide influence now, all around the world. The President denied that advancement as well. If America doesn't lead, are we going to count on the Jordanians? Are we going to count on Middle Eastern countries to take up this battle, this fight? Don't we need America to be fully engaged to actually win this war against modern fascism in our time?
There's no question about it, and the fact of the matter is, for all his talk that he thinks is in defense of Muslims, this president, because of the way he left Iraq, this vice president, his failure to get a status of a forces agreement, they have, in my humble opinion, lots and lots of blood on their hands. Many, many Muslims, Christians, and others have died as a result of their actions. He can give as many speeches and issue as many bumper stickers as he wants. And here's the other point. All right. We are going to get hit. If we do not hit this enemy where this enemy is, we are going to get hit again.
All right. Thank you, the great one, Mark Levin. Appreciate you being on the program.